The world only saw the fairy tale Isabella Beaumont, the graceful wife of billionaire industrialist Julian Beaumont, pregnant with the heir to a vast fortune. But when Julian's helicopter vanished from the sky, Isabella's perfect world didn't just crack, it exploded. At his funeral, a beautiful stranger named Sophia Laurent stepped out of the shadows, a hand resting on her own swollen belly, and declared herself the true keeper of Julian's heart. Now these two pregnant women, a wife and a mistress, are on a collision course heading for a will reading that will expose a web of secrets so dark it will either destroy them both or reveal a final shocking truth that no one saw coming. Life inside the Beaumont estate in Greenwich, Connecticut was a masterpiece of curated perfection. From the outside, it was a sprawling stone manor, its ivy-clad walls guarding acres of manicured lawns that rolled down to the serene waters of the Long Island Sound. For Isabella Beaumont, it had been a dream then, a home, and now increasingly a beautiful silent cage. She traced the rim of her porcelain teacup, the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the solarium. The gardens were in full bloom, a riot of color meticulously planned by a team of landscape artists. Yet the beauty felt distant, like a painting she could admire but never touch. At 7 months pregnant, Isabella should have been basking in the glow of impending motherhood. Instead, a persistent chill had settled deep in her bones, one that had nothing to do with the central air conditioning. Her husband, Julian Beaumont, was a force of nature, a titan of industry who had inherited a respectable manufacturing firm from his father and with ruthless genius transformed it into Beaumont Global, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate with interests in tech, energy, and aerospace. He was brilliant, impossibly handsome, with his sharp jawline and intense steel-gray eyes, and moved through the world with an unnerving confidence that bordered on arrogance. When they met, she was an art history curator at the Met, passionate and full of life. He'd been a whirlwind romance, private jets to Paris for dinner, shutting down Tiffany & Co. for a private shopping experience, a proposal under the northern lights in a glass igloo in Finland. He had painted a world for her, and she had stepped into it willingly. But the whirlwind had long since settled into a predictable and often lonely routine. Julian's business trips became more frequent, his nights at the office longer. The passion that had once defined them was replaced by a polite, courteous distance. He was a good provider, a respectable husband in the eyes of their elite social circle. But the emotional intimacy had evaporated, leaving a void that Isabella filled by focusing on her pregnancy, their legacy project, as Julian had once called it, in a moment of detached planning. She placed a hand on her burgeoning stomach, feeling the gentle flutter of the life within her. This child, a son they already knew, was her anchor. He was the future, the tangible proof of their union, the one thing she was sure was real in a life that felt increasingly like a performance. The phone rang, its shrill tone shattering the morning's fragile peace. It was Mr. Alistair Finch, Julian's longtime attorney and friend. His voice, usually so measured and calm, was strained. "Isabella," he began, in the absence of his usual pleasantries, sent a jolt of pure ice through her veins. "There's been an incident. It's Julian's helicopter." The world tilted on its axis. "An incident? What kind of incident?" she asked, her voice a reedy whisper. "It lost contact with air traffic control an hour ago. It was flying over the Rockies en route to a site inspection in Colorado. The weather turned unexpectedly. Search and rescue is on site, but—" "Isabella, the initial reports are not good." The teacup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was deafening in the silence that followed. She didn't hear Alistair's attempts to soothe her, didn't register the housekeeper rushing in. All she could see was Julian's face that morning, kissing her on the cheek with the same cool efficiency he applied to signing a business deal. For the heir, he'd said a rare small smile touching his lips as he glanced at her stomach before turning and walking out the door, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous foyer. For the next 8 hours, Isabella existed in a state of suspended animation. News reports flickered on the massive television in the living room, images of a remote snow-dusted mountain pass. Twisted metal wreckage barely visible through the trees. Somber-faced reporters speaking in hushed tones. The official confirmation came just before dusk. There were no survivors. Julian Beaumont, the indomitable Titan, was gone. The grief was a physical blow, a brutal hollow ache that stole her breath. Despite the distance that had grown between them, he was her husband, the father of her unborn child. He was the architect of her entire world. And in an instant, that architect and the world he had built had been obliterated. As the news spread, the phones began to ring incessantly, a deluge of condolences from friends, business associates, and people she barely knew. Each call was a fresh wave of pain, a reminder of the public role she now had to play, the grieving billionaire's widow. Little did she know the most brutal performance of her life was yet to come, and she was about to be thrust onto a stage she never could have imagined. The cage was broken, but what lay outside was not freedom, but a storm of unimaginable chaos. The day of Julian's funeral was a somber spectacle, a perfect reflection of his life, grand, impeccably organized, and emotionally sterile. A line of black town cars snaked its way to the historic St. James's Church on Madison Avenue. The pews were filled with the titans of Wall Street political dignitaries and the upper echelon of New York society, all gathered to pay their respects to a man more feared and admired than loved. Isabella, veiled in black Dior, was the very picture of tragic grace. Supported by her younger brother Ethan, she moved through the suffocating sea of condolences like a ghost. Every, "I'm so sorry for your loss," and "he was a great man," felt like a paper cut, a small sharp sting, against her already raw grief. Her pregnancy was a conspicuous round focal point beneath her mourning dress, a silent testament to the future that had been stolen. The service was impersonal eulogies, focused on Julian's business acumen, his ruthless vision, his philanthropic donations, that were more about tax strategy than genuine charity. No one spoke of Julian, the man, the husband, the father-to-be. Perhaps Isabella thought with a pang of sorrow no one really knew him. It was at the graveside service under a sky the color of slate that the curated perfection of the day was irrevocably shattered. As the final prayer was being said, a woman stepped forward from the periphery of the crowd. She was stunningly beautiful, with raven black hair cascading over the shoulders of a fitted black dress that was just as stylish as Isabella's, but somehow more audacious. Her face, a mask of carefully constructed sorrow, was punctuated by startlingly green eyes. And to Isabella's utter horror, she was also visibly pregnant, her condition just as advanced as her own. A collective silent gasp rippled through the assembled mourners. Who was this woman? She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, stopping just a few feet from the casket. She placed a single white rose on the polished mahogany, her movements theatrical and self-aware. Then she turned her emerald eyes, locking onto Isabella's. "He loved me," the woman said, her voice just loud enough to carry on the cold air, a crystalline sound laced with defiance. "He was coming home to me. To us." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. Ethan's hand tightened on her arm, a steadying anchor in a suddenly churning sea. "Isabella, don't," he murmured, his voice low and urgent. But the woman, who seemed to thrive on the attention of the horrified crowd, took another step closer. "My name is Sophia Laurent," she announced, her gaze sweeping over the mourners before returning to Isabella. "Julian and I were going to build a life together. I'm carrying his child, his son." The implication was a poisoned dagger aimed directly at Isabella's heart. His son, as if the child Isabella carried was somehow less legitimate, a mere placeholder. The public humiliation was suffocating. Whispers erupted like wildfire through the crowd. Cameras held by the press, who were kept at a respectable distance, began to click furiously, zooming in on the unfolding drama. Alistair Finch, his face a thunderous mask of propriety, stepped forward. "Ms. Laurent, this is neither the time nor the place." Sophia gave a tearful, dismissive wave of her hand. "The time and place were stolen from me," she retorted, her voice breaking with practiced sorrow. "I won't be erased. I am a part of his legacy. Our child is his legacy. Isabella stood frozen, the world narrowing to the beautiful, smug face of the other woman. Every business trip, every late night, every moment of emotional distance suddenly snapped into a new, horrific context. It wasn't just work. It was her. Sophia. The name felt alien and venomous on her tongue. How could she not have known? The question swirled in her mind, a nauseating vortex of betrayal. Ethan, ever the protector, moved to stand between Isabella and Sophia. "You need to leave," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Now." Sophia held his gaze for a beat, a flicker of triumph in her eyes before allowing her face to crumple back into a mask of the wronged woman. She cast one last lingering look at Julian's casket, then turned and walked away, her departure as dramatic as her arrival, leaving a trail of chaos and speculation in her wake. The rest of the funeral was a blur. Isabella was escorted back to the car, insulated from the voracious stares and hushed conversations by Ethan's protective presence. The ride back to the silent, empty mansion in Greenwich was a journey into a new reality. The grief for her husband was now hopelessly entangled with the gut-wrenching pain of his betrayal. Later that evening, Alistair Finch arrived, his expression grim. He sat opposite Isabella in the vast, cold living room, a leather-bound briefcase resting on his lap. "Isabella, I am profoundly sorry for what happened today." He began his formality, a thin veil over his discomfort. "It was unconscionable." Was it true? Alistair, Isabella's voice was hollow. This woman, Sophia, was he with her? Alistair hesitated, choosing his words with legal precision. Julian was a private man. There are aspects of his life he did not share with me. It was a non-answer, and yet it was all the confirmation she needed. "What happens now?" she asked, wrapping her arms around her belly, a primal instinct to protect her child from the fallout. "Now we wait," Alistair said, his gaze steady. "Julian's will is to be read in my office in 2 weeks' time. He was very specific about the timing and attendees. A formal notice will be sent to you." He paused, then added with a note of warning, "And I'm afraid to Ms. Laurent as well." The room grew colder. Julian had included his mistress in his will reading. The betrayal wasn't just a secret affair. It was a documented one. Isabella felt a terrifying premonition creep over her. The battle for Julian Beaumont's legacy had just begun, and the serpent was already in the garden. The 2 weeks leading up to the will reading were a form of psychological torture for Isabella. The Greenwich mansion, once a symbol of her status, now felt like a mausoleum, its silent halls echoing with unspoken questions and the ghosts of 1,000 lies. She'd wake up in the middle of the night in the cold, empty, king-sized bed, her mind racing, replaying every moment of the past few years, searching for signs she had missed. Had she been naive, willfully blind, or was Julian simply that masterful a deceiver? The media had a field day with the funeral spectacle. Sophia Laurent was splashed across the pages of tabloids and gossip websites, portrayed as the tragic secret lover. She gave a single carefully worded interview to a prominent magazine, painting a picture of a profound love affair of a man trapped in a passionless marriage of convenience. She spoke of their shared dreams, their plans for the future, and their unborn son, whom she claimed Julian had already named Julian Jr. Every word was a calculated strike designed to undermine Isabella's position and legitimize her own. Sophia was also making moves. Isabella learned through a distraught household manager that Sophia had moved into Julian's private penthouse on Park Avenue, a property Isabella hadn't even known he'd kept. She was seen being chauffeured in one of Julian's reserve cars, dining at his favorite restaurants, and meeting with Beaumont global executives, projecting an aura of authority as if she were already the new matriarch of the Beaumont empire. Isabella's brother Ethan was her rock. A former investigative journalist turned private security consultant, he was practical, cynical, and fiercely loyal. He moved into one of the guest wings of the mansion, refusing to leave his sister's side. "This whole thing stinks, Izzy," he said one evening, scrolling through his laptop at the massive kitchen island. This Sophia Laurent character just appeared out of thin air. There's no social media history before 2 years ago, no family to speak of. It's like she was created in a lab to be a billionaire's mistress. She's pregnant, Ethan. Isabella said, her voice weary. That part is real. I saw her. She's as pregnant as I am. Pregnancy can be faked, or the circumstances can be misrepresented, Ethan countered, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Alistair said the will reading is in 3 days. I don't have time to do a deep dive, but I'm telling you, my gut is screaming that something is off. Julian was a bastard, we all knew that. But he was a meticulous, calculating bastard. This public drama doesn't feel like his style. It's sloppy. Isabella wanted to believe him, but the evidence of her husband's betrayal was overwhelming. She had found receipts from florists she didn't use, credit card statements with charges for jewelry. She had never received flight manifests for 2 to destinations he had supposedly visited alone. The affair was real. The only question that remained was its depth. Was Sophia a passing fancy, or had she truly captured the heart of a man Isabella realized she may have never truly known? On the eve of the will reading, Isabella found herself in the nursery. The room was a sanctuary of soft blues and creams, a custom-built crib standing in the center, a mobile of handcrafted wooden planets hanging above it. Julian had overseen its design with the same detached precision he applied to a corporate boardroom, but he had approved every detail. He had wanted this child, or had he simply wanted an heir? A wave of fear, cold and sharp, washed over her. What if Sophia was right? What if Julian had planned to leave her for this other woman, this other family? A life as a single mother was one thing. A life cast aside, disinherited, and publicly shamed was another entirely. The Beaumont name and fortune were the only security she could offer her son now, and the thought of it being snatched away by a usurper was terrifying. She picked up a small silver rattle from the changing table, a family heirloom from her own side of the family. Its weight was cool and solid in her palm. Her own legacy felt so small, so fragile compared to the colossal Beaumont empire. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered to the silent room, her voice trembling slightly, "I will protect you. I promise." That same night, across the city, in the sleek, minimalist penthouse overlooking Central Park, Sophia Laurent was a picture of serene confidence. She hosted a small dinner for a handful of Julian's more opportunistic business associates, men who were already calculating how to align themselves with the new power structure. She spoke of Julian's vision using the we pronoun with practiced ease. "We always felt that the company needed a more aggressive approach in the Asian markets," she'd say, her hand resting proprietorially on her stomach. Her closest confidant, a sharp-tongued socialite named Genevieve, cornered her by the window after the other guests had left. "You're playing a dangerous game," Sophia Genevieve warned, sipping her champagne. "The grieving widow is a powerful archetype, and she's actually pregnant." Sophia smiled, a slow, predatory curving of her lips. She looked down at the glittering city below. "The grieving widow is yesterday's news. The world loves a love story, darling, and ours is the stuff of legends, a love so powerful it couldn't be contained by a meaningless marriage." She turned, her green eyes glinting in the low light. "Besides, I have the ultimate trump card. Julian made sure of it. Tomorrow isn't a reading. It's a coronation. Isabella Beaumont is about to find out that she was never the queen. She was just the placeholder. Her confidence was absolute, her victory seemingly assured. As the sun set on the eve of reckoning, 2 pregnant women, worlds apart, prepared for a battle that would determine not just their futures, but the fate of an entire empire. The law offices of Finch, Covington, and Stowe occupied the top 3 floors of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan, a bastion of old money and ruthless corporate law. The boardroom where the will was to be read was a study in intimidating luxury. A long, polished mahogany table, high-backed leather chairs, and a panoramic view of the city that seemed to declare its own power. Isabella arrived with Ethan, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She was dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue maternity dress, her bearing poised and dignified, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within her. Sophia Laurent was already there. She was seated at the head of the table opposite the executor's chair, as if it were her rightful place. She wore a striking emerald green dress that accentuated her pregnancy, and her eyes a bold statement of life and victory in a room heavy with the weight of death. She offered Isabella a small pitying smile that didn't reach her eyes. The only other person present was Alistair Finch. He sat at the head of the table, the last will and testament of Julian Beaumont in a sealed leather portfolio before him. His face was impassive, betraying no hint of the bombshells he was about to detonate. "Thank you both for coming," Alistair began, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "We are here today to execute the last will and testament of my client and friend, Julian Beaumont. The document was drafted and signed 3 months ago and is to my knowledge his final and definitive statement of his wishes." Isabella's breath hitched. 3 months ago. That was after she had told Julian she was pregnant. It meant that every decision recorded in this document was made with the full knowledge of his unborn son with her. Alistair broke the seal and opened the portfolio. He cleared his throat and began to read. The preamble was standard legal jargon establishing Julian's identity and sound state of mind. Then came the smaller bequests, donations to his alma mater, gifts to distant relatives, a generous severance for his personal staff. Isabella listened, her hands clenched in her lap, waiting for the axe to fall. "Regarding my personal effects," Alistair read, his voice a steady monotone. "My watch collection, art pieces housed in the Greenwich residence, and classic automobiles are to be placed in a trust for my son, to be born of my wife, Isabella Beaumont, and to be granted to him on his 25th birthday. A small victory. A flicker of hope." Her son was acknowledged. Sophia shifted in her chair, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face, but her confident smirk remained. She was waiting for the main event. "Now," Alistair said, pausing for effect as he turned a page, "we come to the primary assets of the estate." The room felt airless. "To my wife, Isabella Beaumont," Alistair continued, "I bequeath the sum of $5 million tax-free. I also leave her sole ownership of the seaside cottage in Montauk, where we spent our first weekend together, along with all its contents. I trust this will provide her with a comfortable and secure future." Isabella felt the words like a physical blow. $5 million. To the world, a fortune. In the context of the Beaumont empire, it was pocket change, a severance package. The Montauk cottage was a sentimental, almost cruel gesture, a reminder of a love that had long since died. She was being dismissed, paid off like a former employee. Ethan reached under the table and squeezed her hand, his knuckles white. Sophia, however, did not gloat. She looked almost disappointed, as if she expected Isabella to get even less. Her focus was absolute, waiting for her own name. Alistair took a deep breath before reading the next clause, the one that would change everything. "All remaining assets, including my primary residence in Greenwich, Connecticut, my penthouse apartment on Park Avenue, my complete portfolio of stocks, bonds, and private equity investments, and most importantly, my 75% controlling interest in Beaumont Global and all its subsidiary companies, I bequeath in their entirety to a single trust." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. This was it. The entire empire. Billions of dollars and immense global power, all held within one trust. This trust, Alistair read, his eyes fixed on the page, shall be known as the Laurent Beaumont Legacy Trust. Its sole beneficiaries are to be Ms. Sophia Laurent, and my unborn child to be born of her. The silence that followed was deafening. It was an utter and complete devastation. Julian had not just chosen his mistress. He had handed her his entire world, his life's work, his legacy. He had effectively erased Isabella and her son from the dynasty he had built. Sophia let out a soft, theatrical sigh, a single tear tracing a perfect path down her cheek. She looked at Isabella, her expression a flawless blend of sorrow and triumph. "I'm sorry, Isabella," she said, her voice soft. "I never wanted to hurt you. This was always just about love." his love for me and for our son. Isabella felt nothing but a vast icy numbness. She was a fool, a naive, trusting fool who had been living in a beautifully constructed lie. Her marriage, her life, her future, all of it had been a sham. Ethan began to rise from his chair, his face contorted with rage. This is a disgrace. He couldn't have been in his right mind. Ethan, please. Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible. There was nothing to be done. The words were there in black and white. It was over. Alistair Finch held up a hand. Mr. Thorne, please. I am not finished. Sophia's triumphant expression faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Isabella looked at the lawyer, her eyes hollow and blank. What more could there possibly be? What further humiliation could Julian have possibly devised? There are, Alistair said, his voice taking on a new, harder edge. Several codicils and binding stipulations attached to the formation and execution of the Laurent Beaumont Legacy Trust. They are non-negotiable and absolute. He turned to the next page, and the atmosphere in the room shifted from one of settled tragedy to a sharp, sudden uncertainty. The game, it seemed, was not yet over. Alistair Finch adjusted his glasses, his demeanor shifting from that of a dispassionate reader to a surgeon preparing for a delicate and critical incision. The air in the boardroom crackled with renewed tension. Sophia's victorious composure was replaced by a wary stillness, while Isabella looked on with detached curiosity, believing there was no further pain that could be inflicted. Let us proceed to the stipulations governing the Laurent Beaumont Legacy Trust, Alistair announced, his voice echoing slightly in the silent room. Stipulation 1. He cleared his throat. The primary condition for the activation and funding of this trust rests upon the confirmation of paternity for the child of Ms. Sophia Laurent. Within 24 hours of the child's birth, a court-admissible DNA sample must be collected by a medically certified third party appointed by the executor of my estate. This sample will be compared against my own DNA, which is on file with this firm. Should the results confirm, with a 99.9% or greater certainty, that I am the biological father, the trust will be immediately and irrevocably funded. Sophia's confident smile returned, though it was a little tighter this time. Of course, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. A formality. Julian was always so thorough. Indeed, Alistair said, his expression unreadable. Which brings us to stipulation 2. In the event that the DNA test proves I am not the biological father, the Laurent Beaumont Legacy Trust will be declared null and void. Ms. Sophia Laurent will be permanently and completely disinherited from my estate, forfeiting any and all claims. She will receive nothing. Sophia's face paled slightly. That's aggressive, she murmured, her bravado faltering. But irrelevant. It's Julian's child. Isabella watched the exchange, a tiny, unfamiliar spark igniting in the cold emptiness of her chest. It was a flicker of doubt, not in Julian's betrayal, but in Sophia's story. Julian was nothing if not thorough. A paternity test was exactly the kind of cold clinical failsafe he would install. Stipulation 3. Alistair continued, his voice relentless. Contingent upon the establishment of the trust, all assets and control of Beaumont Global will be managed by a board of trustees of which I am the chairman until the child reaches the age of 30. Ms. Laurent will be granted a generous annual stipend for her and the child's living expenses. She will hold no executive power, no voting shares, and will have no direct control over the company or its finances whatsoever. This time, Sophia could not hide her shock. Her jaw tightened and the color drained from her face. The dream of stepping into Julian's shoes, of wielding his power, had just been vaporized. She was to be a beneficiary, not a ruler. A well-kept figurehead. That's absurd, she snapped, her voice losing its soft, mournful quality and taking on a sharp, shrewish edge. Julian wanted me to be his partner. He trusted my judgment. His final written instructions state otherwise. Alistair replied coolly, not looking up from the page. Which leads to the final and perhaps most pertinent clause. Stipulation 4. He paused and looked directly at Sophia, his gaze steady and penetrating. Effective immediately upon the reading of this will I have authorized the executor of my estate, that is myself, to initiate a full and comprehensive forensic audit of all my personal and corporate accounts for the preceding 36 months. This audit will specifically investigate any and all financial transfers, gifts, wire transactions, and credit expenditures made to or for the benefit of Ms. Sophia Laurent. Sophia froze her face, a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. Alistair went on, his words precise and devastating. The purpose of this audit is to identify any evidence of fraud, misrepresentation, or manipulation. The will explicitly states, and I quote, "Should this audit reveal that Ms. Laurent has deliberately misled me regarding the nature of our relationship, her personal circumstances, or most critically, the paternity of her child, it will be considered a material breach of trust." In the event of such a finding, all clauses pertaining to Ms. Laurent and the Laurent Beaumont Legacy Trust are to be rendered void regardless of the outcome of any future DNA test. The trap had been sprung. It was brilliant, cruel, and utterly Julian. He hadn't just suspected her. He had built an inescapable legal cage around her. The will wasn't a love letter to his mistress. It was a posthumous interrogation under oath. Isabella stared at Alistair, her mind reeling. The pieces were clicking into place with dizzying speed. The public drama Ethan had called sloppy and not his style suddenly made sense. Julian hadn't caused it. He had anticipated it. He knew Sophia would make a public claim, and he had set a snare of spectacular proportions. Sophia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "This is an insult, an invasion of my privacy. You can't. I won't allow it." "You have no choice," Ms. Laurent, Alistair said calmly. "These are not suggestions. They are the legally binding terms set forth by the deceased. The audit has in fact already begun. The preliminary team was engaged the moment I received confirmation of Julian's death." The blood drained completely from Sophia's face. She looked cornered, a predator suddenly finding herself in a hunter's sights. Her eyes darted from Alistair to Isabella, a wild, desperate look replacing her earlier smugness. But Alistair wasn't finished. He turned to the final page of the will. "There is one last provision," he said, his voice softening slightly as his gaze fell upon Isabella. "It is a default clause to be enacted only if the Laurent Beaumont Legacy Trust is dissolved for any of the reasons previously stated." He looked at Isabella, a flicker of what might have been sympathy in his old tired eyes. "In such an event, the will states, all assets, properties, investments, and controlling interests in Beaumont Global designated for the aforementioned trust shall instead be transferred in their entirety and without condition to a new trust. This trust shall be named the Beaumont Family Legacy Trust. Its sole beneficiaries will be my beloved wife, Isabella Beaumont, and our legitimate and true heir, our son to be born of her." The room spun. Isabella gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Beloved wife. Legitimate and true heir. The words were a balm on a gaping wound. It wasn't a dismissal. It was protection. The $5 million in the cottage weren't a payoff. They were a safety net, a provision to ensure she was cared for in the interim while the trap closed on Sophia. He had known. Julian had known he was being played, and from beyond the grave he had orchestrated his final ruthless and brilliant move. He had used his will not to reward his mistress, but to utterly and completely destroy her, while simultaneously safeguarding the future of the one person who truly carried his legacy. Sophia Laurent stared at Isabella, her green eyes filled not with triumph, but with pure, unadulterated hatred. The war was not over, but the decisive battle had just been fought, and the victor was not who anyone had expected. The aftermath of the will reading was like a controlled demolition. Sophia Laurent, stripped of her smug certainty, fled Alistair Finch's office, in a fury refusing to speak to the press that had mysteriously been tipped off and were waiting for her downstairs. Her panicked, No comment was a stark contrast to the serene interviews she had given just days before. For Isabella, the world had been reconfigured. The grief for her husband remained, but it was now colored by a profound, complicated sense of awe. He had been distant, unfaithful, and emotionally unavailable. Yet in his own cold, calculating way, he had fiercely protected her and their son. He hadn't trusted her with the truth while he was alive, but he had armed her with it after his death. It was the most Julian Beaumont act imaginable. Ethan, vindicated and energized, immediately set his own investigation into high gear, working in parallel with the official forensic audit commissioned by Alistair. "We're not waiting for the accountants to find the breadcrumbs," he told Isabella. "We're going to find the whole damn loaf." The unraveling of Sophia Laurent happened with breathtaking speed. The first thread to be pulled was financial. Alistair's auditors, a notoriously discreet and relentless firm from Zurich, were merciless. Within a week, they uncovered a systematic siphoning of funds. Julian had given Sophia a lavish allowance and access to a credit card for living expenses. She had been using it to funnel money into offshore accounts under a different name, Sophia Dubois, her birth name which she had legally changed 2 years prior. She had been building a nest egg, preparing for an exit. But the transfers weren't the most damning discovery. The audit uncovered regular substantial payments to a man named Dr. Marcus Thorne. He wasn't a reputable obstetrician from a Park Avenue clinic. He was a disgraced doctor who had lost his license for selling fraudulent medical documents. Ethan's team, working from that lead, descended on Thorne's shabby office in a Queens strip mall. Faced with the threat of federal fraud charges, Dr. Thorne sang like a canary. He confessed to providing Sophia with a complete set of falsified medical records, sonograms, blood tests, due dates, all carefully crafted to mirror Isabella's pregnancy timeline. He had been coaching her on how to mimic pregnancy symptoms, what to say to her new high society friends. The most shocking revelation was that Sophia was pregnant, but the conception date on her genuine hidden medical records was from a time when Julian Beaumont was verifiably on a different continent. "She played him from the start," Ethan told Isabella, pacing the study in the Greenwich mansion. "She found out you were pregnant and saw her opening. She knew Julian wanted an heir more than anything, so she got pregnant herself by some other guy and sold Julian a story about a miracle baby, their secret love child. The other guy was the final piece of the puzzle. Digging into Sophia's life before she became Sophia Laurent, Ethan's investigators found him a handsome, struggling actor named Leo. The offshore accounts Sophia had been building were in both of their names. Their plan was audacious and simple. Sophia would secure the Beaumont fortune through her son, divorce the father of her child, and then after a decent period of mourning or settlement, she and Leo would reunite billions of dollars richer and live happily ever after. The evidence was a mountain, irrefutable and damning. Alistair Finch compiled the findings into a thick, damning report. He arranged a final meeting. It was held in the same boardroom as the will reading. This time Isabella sat at the head of the table. She was no longer the fragile, grieving widow. A new strength radiated from her, a calm, steely resolve. She was the queen, reclaiming her throne. Sophia was escorted in by 2 of Alistair's junior lawyers. She looked haggard, the designer clothes hanging on a frame that had lost weight from stress. The pregnancy prosthesis she had occasionally used to enhance her belly for photos was gone, and while still pregnant, she looked smaller, diminished. Her defiance was gone, replaced by a sullen, bitter resentment. Leo, her accomplice, was nowhere to be seen. Ethan's team discovered he had already fled the country the moment the audit was announced. Alistair didn't waste time with pleasantries. He laid out the evidence piece by damning piece. The fraudulent medical records, the bank statements from the offshore accounts, the sworn affidavit from Dr. Thorne, the flight records proving Leo, not Julian, was with her at the time of conception. The forensic audit has revealed a clear and calculated pattern of fraud. Ms. Laurent, Alistair concluded, his voice cold as ice. "You have breached the terms of the will in the most egregious manner possible. As per Julian Beaumont's explicit instructions, any and all provisions for you and the child you carry are hereby null and void. You are disinherited." Sophia stared at the document spread on the table, her face a mask of disbelief as if she couldn't comprehend how her perfect plan had crumbled so completely. "He loved me," she whispered, the words sounding hollow and pathetic even to her own ears. "He knew. I know he did. He wouldn't do this." Isabella spoke for the first time, her voice clear and steady, cutting through Sophia's delusion. "No, Sophia. He didn't love you. He tolerated you. And then he figured you out. You weren't his great love. You were his final business transaction. And he made sure you were the one who paid the price." In that moment, Isabella finally understood the cold, brilliant, and heartbreakingly distant man she had married. Julian didn't operate on love. He operated on logic, loyalty, and legacy. Sophia had threatened his legacy. In his eyes, that was a betrayal far worse than simple infidelity. Sophia finally broke. A strangled sob escaped her lips, a sound of pure selfish rage at being outplayed. She stood up, knocking her chair over. "You think you've won?" she spat at Isabella, her eyes wild with hate. "You're still the woman he cheated on. You'll sleep in his bed and run his company, but you'll always know you weren't enough." Isabella met her gaze without flinching. "And you'll always be the woman who was nothing more than a footnote in a cautionary tale. Get out." Defeated and exposed, Sophia Laurent was escorted from the building, walking away from a life she had come so close to stealing. She left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the impending consequences of federal fraud charges, which Alistair's firm was pursuing with vigor. The serpent had been cast out of the garden, leaving Isabella alone to finally truly claim her inheritance. The weeks following Sophia's spectacular fall from grace were not quiet, but they were orderly. The chaos had been replaced by a focused, deliberate rebuilding. For Isabella, it was like stepping out of a darkened room into the full glare of the sun. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust, but soon she could see everything with a piercing, newfound clarity. The oppressive weight of Julian's secrets had been lifted, and in its place was the colossal, intimidating, and yet exhilarating weight of his entire empire. Her first major challenge was the board of directors at Beaumont Global. They were men of Julian's generation, silver-haired, clad in bespoke suits, and steeped in a corporate culture of aggressive, relentless growth. They had viewed Julian with a mixture of fear and reverence and saw Isabella as little more than a tragic, beautiful footnote who would, they assumed, serve as a figurehead while they ran the company. They were profoundly mistaken. She called her first board meeting 2 weeks after the will reading. She walked into the boardroom on the 80th floor, the same intimidating space where her life had been torn apart and then pieced back together, not with the hesitant grief they expected, but with a serene, unshakable composure. She didn't take Julian's seat at the head of the table. Instead, she chose a chair midway down, a subtle but clear message that this was not a continuation of the old reign, but the beginning of something new. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice calm and measured, carrying easily across the cavernous room. "I know many of you are concerned about the future of Beaumont Global. You are wondering about continuity, about stability. Let me be clear. I have no intention of being my late husband. His genius for acquisitions and ruthless expansion was singular. Attempting to mimic it would be a disservice to his memory and a disaster for this company." A wave of relief followed by renewed uncertainty washed over the faces of the board members. However, she continued, her gaze sweeping over each of them. "Where Julian's focus was on relentless growth, mine will be on sustainable legacy. His strength was in building an empire. Mine will be in ensuring it's an empire worth leaving to our children." She then proceeded with methodical precision to outline a 3-point plan that addressed the company's most glaring weakness, its abysmal public image and high employee turnover, a direct result of Julian's cutthroat internal policies. She proposed a new corporate responsibility initiative, a complete overhaul of employee benefits, and the establishment of an innovation lab focused on green technology, a sector Julian had always dismissed as sentimental nonsense. She wasn't just quoting talking points prepared by an advisor. She had done her homework, citing their own internal reports and market analysis to support her vision. The men in the room who had arrived expecting to manage a grieving widow found themselves facing a shrewd, intelligent leader with a clear, well-articulated vision. By the end of the meeting, the skepticism had been replaced by a grudging, then genuine respect. She hadn't won them over with force, but with a quiet competence that was in its own way more formidable than Julian's overt aggression. With the company on a new steady course, Isabella turned her attention inward. She finalized the sale of the cold, imposing Greenwich mansion, feeling a profound sense of release as she signed the papers. Before moving into the elegant Upper East Side brownstone she had purchased, she took a weekend for herself, driving out to the Montauk cottage, the one property Julian had left her in that first seemingly cruel clause. The cottage was just as she remembered: weathered cedar shingles, a wraparound porch, the scent of salt and beach roses in the air. This was the one place where she had felt the unvarnished truth of their early love. Inside, she found an old photo album tucked away in a drawer. There they were, 10 years younger, smiling on the beach, the wind whipping her hair as Julian held her tight. He looked genuinely happy, a rare, unguarded glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with, before the weight of his own ambition had crushed the warmth out of him. Sitting on the porch, watching the waves crash against the shore, she finally allowed herself to grieve him properly. Not the corporate titan or the unfaithful husband, but the brilliant, complicated, and ultimately lonely man who had known he was being deceived and had concocted a plan of Byzantine complexity to protect the one thing he truly deemed his legacy, his legitimate child. She understood with a sorrowful clarity that the will was his version of a love letter. He couldn't say "I love you" or "I'm sorry," so he had written it in the language of codicils, stipulations, and trusts. It was heartbreaking, but it was also finally enough. She could forgive him. 2 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Isabella went into labor. In the quiet private room of the hospital, with Ethan by her side, she brought her son into the world. He was perfect, a healthy, beautiful baby with a shock of dark hair and his father's unmistakable steel-gray eyes. As the nurse placed him in her arms, Isabella looked into that tiny, searching face and felt a wave of love so fierce and protective it took her breath away. For a moment she considered naming him Julian, a nod to the man who had in the end secured his future. But looking at her son, she knew that wasn't right. This child would not be a carbon copy burdened by his father's complex legacy. He would be his own person. She decided to name him Arthur, after her own father, a man of quiet integrity and boundless warmth. He would carry the Beaumont name, but he would be raised with a different set of values: compassion, emotional honesty, and the understanding that true strength isn't about controlling others, but about empowering them. Her first major public appearance was not at a corporate gala, but at a press conference held in a modest community center. There she announced the launch of the Beaumont Foundation for Women and Children, an organization dedicated to providing legal aid, financial support, and safe housing for single mothers and victims of financial and emotional abuse. The Beaumont name has long been associated with power, she said, her voice steady as she stood at the podium, holding Arthur securely in a sling against her chest. Today, we are redefining that power. It will no longer be the power to acquire, but the power to protect. It will be the power to lift up those who have been manipulated, deceived, or left vulnerable. This is not just charity. It is our new mission. The news made headlines, reshaping the public narrative from one of a scandalous affair to one of inspiring resilience. Ethan brought her the final update on Sophia Laurent a few months later. Facing insurmountable legal fees and federal fraud charges, Sophia had quietly accepted a plea deal. She had given birth to a daughter, but her maternal instincts were no match for her instinct for self-preservation. Overwhelmed and penniless, she had surrendered the child for adoption, and upon serving a short sentence disappeared completely, her name and story fading into a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. The news brought Isabella no joy, only a quiet sadness for the innocent child caught in the web of her mother's ambition. Years later, standing on the balcony of her brownstone, watching a 5-year-old Arthur chase leaves in the garden below, Isabella felt a profound and lasting peace. She was no longer just the billionaire's wife or the billionaire's widow. She was Isabella Beaumont, CEO, philanthropist, and mother. She had taken the shattered pieces of the life she'd been given and had built something stronger and more beautiful. Julian had left her a legacy of wealth and power, but she had transformed it into a legacy of truth, creating a new dynasty built not on the cold bedrock of ambition, but on the enduring foundation of a mother's unconditional love. The gilded cage was a distant memory. She was finally, truly free. Isabella's journey from a betrayed wife to a powerful leader is a raw and potent reminder that the greatest betrayals can sometimes forge the greatest strengths. It's a story about looking beneath the surface of a fairy tale life to find the complicated and often painful truths hidden there. Her story proves that true legacy isn't about the money you inherit, but the character you build when everything is on the line. She didn't just win a fortune. She reclaimed her life and redefined her future on her own terms. What did you think of Julian's ultimate plan? Was it a cruel act of revenge or a brilliant act of protection? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of intrigue, betrayal, and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a dramatic tale, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.
He sneered at her maternity dress, chuckling under his breath as though she was a joke. Little did he know, within 24 hours, that same woman would hold the power to change his entire world. Would you believe that a single knock on her apartment door could turn a penniless, expectant mother into a landlord overnight? Yet here we are with an old key, an unexpected inheritance and a twist of fate that would bind two sworn enemies under one roof. Prepare yourself for a tale of wounded pride, startling secrets, and shattered illusions, because sometimes destiny doesn't simply knock, it barges in unannounced. On a drizzly afternoon in Midtown Manhattan, Sophia Kim bustled her way into a cozy cafe on East 43rd Street. She gently tugged at her loose-fitting maternity dress, a fluttering pastel blue garment that had seen better days. Sophia was 7 months pregnant, and though her savings were meager, she carried herself with quiet determination. Each day she told herself that life's storms only made her stronger. As she entered Brew & Bloom, she noticed the cafe was filled with the usual eclectic crowd of city workers taking their breaks. A few well-dressed men in dark suits perched around a high table, sipping espressos as they exchanged hushed business talk. A group of college students hovered near the back laptops, open scribbling notes in battered, spiral-bound notebooks. Sophia joined the long queue, her swollen ankles protesting against standing for too long. She discreetly shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to balance her exhaustion with politeness. That was when she spotted a sleek black wallet slipping from someone's table and landing with a thud near her feet. She crouched a bit awkwardly with her pregnant belly and lifted the wallet. The sleek leather carried an embossed monogram NT. She looked up, seeking its owner, and saw a tall, dashing man with perfectly styled brown hair and an impossibly expensive-looking suit. "Excuse me," Sophia called, stepping forward. "Is this yours?" He turned, eyes scanning her from head to toe, lingering on her maternity dress. A smirk twisted across his lips. He grabbed the wallet from her outstretched hand, barely mumbling a thank you. Instead, he cocked an eyebrow. "They still make dresses like that," he said, voice dripping with amusement. Sophia's cheeks flushed crimson. She blinked, trying to steady her breath. Did he really just throw an insult at her unprovoked? Her dress might have been outdated, but it was all she could afford after patching together rent and medical expenses. She expected an apology or at least a polite nod, but none came. Instead, he motioned to the barista, apparently impatient for his double macchiato, and turned his back as though Sophia were invisible. The men around him snickered, focusing on the discolored hem of her dress. Sophia's eyes stung with tears, but she refused to crumble in front of a man who looked like he stepped out of a Wall Street billboard. Nicholas Townsend. She caught the name stitched on his briefcase, strolled away with his coffee in one hand and phone in the other, leaving Sophia behind as the cafe line inched forward. She couldn't help but overhear him bragging to a friend on the phone. Yes, Dad's finalizing the deal with Morgan and Finch tomorrow. Once that's done, it's practically ours. But I told him it's a worthless old building. If it were up to me, I'd tear it down. She frowned, her curiosity piqued. What building was worthless in Nicholas Townsend's eyes? And why did his words prickle at her sense of justice? She tried to shake off the moment, focusing on ordering her decaf cappuccino, but the laughter at her expense echoed in her head. If only he knew who she was, or who she might become. Later that same afternoon, Sophia trudged home under a broken umbrella that barely kept the drizzle at bay. Her studio apartment was situated in a worn-down building on East 12th Street. Tiny by Manhattan standards, it was still her refuge. The paint peeled in the hallway, and the elevator frequently broke, but it was hers at least until her lease ended. Inside her apartment, a single flick of a switch illuminated the cramped living space. The sofa doubled as her bed, and near the window a small desk served as her writing nook, where she scribbled half-finished short stories in the hope of publishing them someday. Stacks of library books lined the wall. One, ironically, was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a borrowed volume she'd hoped would inspire her to make better financial decisions. She had scarcely set her mug down when the phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number from California. A wave of concern washed over her. She rarely received calls from outside the city, and she had no family in California, at least none she was aware of. "Hello," Sophia answered. A calm, polite voice responded. "Am I speaking to Miss Sophia Kim?" "My name is Abigail Martinez, an attorney at Redwood and Bloom. I'm contacting you regarding a matter of inheritance from your late uncle, Mr. Martin Kim." Sophia's heart fluttered. Uncle Martin. She hadn't seen him since she was a teenager. He was a mysterious figure who had moved to the West Coast for reasons unknown, cutting off most contact with the family. Uncle Martin passed away. Sophia sank onto the sofa, unsettled. "I wasn't aware we'd even been in touch. Your uncle left very particular instructions," Abigail continued. "He had no children, so in his will he bequeathed his property in New York to you. Our records show it's a commercial building located in Lower Manhattan." Sophia nearly dropped her phone. A commercial building. In Lower Manhattan. She must have misheard. She thought Uncle Martin had been drifting from place to place, never settling down. "This might be a mistake," Sophia stammered. "I don't have the means to." "There's no mistake," Abigail assured her. Mr. Kim's wishes explicitly stated that the building and everything in it goes to you. I'll send the documents for your review. The property manager will reach out for further instructions. It seems your uncle trusted you to oversee it." Numb with disbelief, Sophia thanked the attorney and ended the call. Her mind whirled. She stared at her battered maternity dress, ironically, the same target of that arrogant man's mockery. She was unemployed, 7 months pregnant, and scraping by on her meager savings. Suddenly, she owned a commercial building. She couldn't sleep that night. Questions swarmed. How big was this building? Was it run down or worth anything at all? Could she possibly manage tenants? Part of her wanted to wake from what felt like a dream. Another part sensed destiny's hand at work, unraveling an entirely new path for her, one she never could have imagined a few hours ago. Morning arrived grey and overcast, reflecting the confusion clouding Sophia's mind. She received an email from Abigail Martinez containing digital copies of the will. True to her word, Uncle Martin had left Sophia all his worldly belongings, including a 4-story commercial property known as the Walton Building, located near the fringes of Lower Manhattan. A second email from the property manager Henry Paxton introduced him as the day-to-day contact. He requested a meeting at her convenience to hand over keys and discuss urgent matters. Sophia arranged to meet him in front of the building at noon. With a mix of fear and excitement, she donned her only decent coat, a second-hand navy trench, and took the subway downtown. The Walton Building rose before her like a relic from another era. Constructed of red brick with intricate stonework around the windows, it exuded a faint aura of old New York charm. The first floor boasted large glass windows and a sign that read, "Under renovation." On the sidewalk, a man in his late 50s, balding with a rumpled suit, waved at her. "Ms. Kim, I'm Henry. So good to finally meet you." He pressed a heavy bundle of keys into her hand. "I was surprised when Ms. Martinez told me about the inheritance. Your uncle was well an interesting man." Henry paused, looking at her swollen belly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Sophia offered a small smile. "Thank you. I wish I'd known him better." "Can we take a look inside?" Henry led her through the wooden double doors. The ground floor was a vast, open space, with dust-laden floors, covered furniture, and half-demolished walls. The hum of a neglected heating system reverberated in the background. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead, giving the space a faintly ominous feel. He explained that the building's upper floors were divided into office spaces. A couple of the floors were fully rented out, though some tenants had short-term leases. The renovation on the ground floor was supposed to transform it into a chic cafe or restaurant. Except Uncle Martin fell ill, and everything came to a standstill. Sophia's heart pounded. This building was not worthless. It might be old and in dire need of repair, but Henry assured her it carried historical significance. Investors had even approached Martin about partial ownership in the past, but he never sold. They ascended to the second floor, and Henry pointed out several offices with glass partitions. "We have a few tenants here. The rest is vacant, waiting for renovations." Turning a corner, Henry pointed to a door with frosted glass and Townsend and Associates etched in gold letters. A sudden chill ran down Sophia's spine. The name Townsend jolted her memory. Nicholas Townsend, the arrogant man from the cafe. She swallowed hard as Henry continued his explanation, unaware of her reaction. "You'll want to meet your tenants eventually, but Townsend and Associates is one of the main ones. They have a lease until the end of the year." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Nicholas Townsend." Henry nodded. "Yes, him and his father Richard Townsend. They're a real estate investment firm. Rumor has it they were hoping to buy out this building from your uncle eventually. But Mr. Kim never budged." Images of Nicholas's smug, mocking grin filled Sophia's thoughts. She relived the sting of his ridicule over her dress. She could hardly believe it. The man who laughed at her was now her tenant. Her hand clenched around the keys, the weight of her inheritance growing heavier by the second. For the remainder of the walk-through, Sophia listened intently as Henry explained plumbing issues, electrical faults, and future renovation plans. Yet her mind kept drifting back to Nicholas Townsend. She had never wanted to see him again, but fate had other ideas. The next morning, she returned to the Walton building to drop off some documents for Henry. She tried to time her visit so she wouldn't encounter Nicholas. However, as she entered the lobby, she heard raised voices reverberating from the second floor. "She can't just barge in here and change everything," a male voice thundered. Another voice tried to calm him. "Mr. Townsend, please just talk to Miss Kim." Sophia, heart pounding, climbed the old creaking steps. At the top, she found Henry pinned against a wall by Nicholas Townsend's searing glare. The difference between Nicholas's pristine suit and the dusty corridor was stark. "We had a deal with Martin. Kim," Nicholas hissed. "Townsend and Associates was going to purchase this entire dump at a reasonable price. Now I'm hearing rumors that his heir inherited the building. Henry spotted Sophia at the landing and cleared his throat. "Mr. Townsend, let me introduce Ms. Sophia Kim. She's the new owner." Nicholas turned, face twisted in irritation. Recognition ignited in his eyes. His lips parted slightly in shock. Sophia couldn't decide if it was because she was the same woman he'd insulted, or because she was pregnant, or both. "You," he let out a mirthless laugh. "The woman from the cafe, the one with—" He gestured vaguely toward her dress, now replaced by a modest black maternity outfit. "How is this even possible?" Sophia stood straighter, ignoring the rapid hammer of her heart. "I inherited the Walton building from my Uncle Martin Kim. I'm sorry if this complicates your business plans." Nicholas scoffed. "Complicates? This building was supposed to be ours. We were in the final stages of negotiating with Martin. Did he not tell you that he was preparing to sign?" She glanced at Henry, who shrugged helplessly. "I have no records indicating a formal sale agreement. Only that Mr. Kim considered offers, but never signed anything." Nicholas's gaze bore into Sophia. "You're out of your depth. Are you even aware of the building's extensive renovation requirements, its compliance issues? Let me save you the trouble. Sell it to me." A swirl of conflicting emotions seized Sophia. Selling might be the easiest escape. She could use the money to support her unborn child, but something about Nicholas's arrogant tone stiffened her resolve. He thought her powerless and naive, someone easily manipulated. "I'm not selling," she said calmly, surprising even herself. "At least not right now. I need time to understand my uncle's plans and the building's potential." Nicholas took a step forward, his voice low. "The building needs more than your understanding. It needs millions in repairs. Do you have millions lying around?" Sophia refused to back down. "I'll figure it out." He sized her up as though assessing a formidable opponent for the first time. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Fine. You want to play landlord? Let's see how quickly you regret this." With that, Nicholas brushed past her and stormed down the staircase, leaving the air charged with tension. Sophia exhaled shakily, clutching the banister. Never had she felt so challenged, so determined. In a single day, she had transformed from an object of his ridicule to the one who now held the lease over his office. In the weeks that followed, Sophia immersed herself in the labyrinth of property management. With Henry's guidance and a stack of building inspection reports, she quickly realized the Walton building indeed needed substantial investment. The facade required restoration, the electrical wiring was decades out of date, and the plumbing threatened to fail on any given day. Between visits to her doctor for prenatal checkups, Sophia met with contractors, solicited quotes for repairs, and listened to tenants' grievances. She received a crash course in building codes, tenant rights, and real estate law. Her days were exhausting, but for the first time in months, she felt a sense of purpose. She was fighting for something bigger than herself, an inheritance that could secure her and her baby's future. Townsend and Associates, however, remained an unspoken threat. Sophia heard rumors that Nicholas was still pushing the idea of purchasing the building, even going so far as to hint that if she refused, he might rouse local inspectors to look more closely at code violations. The notion made her stomach churn. In the midst of this, she found unexpected allies among the building's tenants. A small marketing startup, Harper Innovations, run by a young entrepreneur named Melissa Harper, offered to help design promotional material for attracting new occupants if Sophia could lower their rent temporarily. A retired editor named Jonathan Brewster, who occupied a small office on the 3rd floor, volunteered to help her review complicated legal documents. "Your uncle was a kind soul," Jonathan told her one afternoon, adjusting his reading glasses. "A bit reclusive, but he had a great heart. He turned down many offers to sell because he believed the building had a historical charm worth preserving." Sophia, seated across his cluttered desk, smiled faintly. "I wish I'd known him better. He never stayed in touch after moving away. Why would he leave all this to me?" Jonathan set aside the papers. "Martin once told me he saw a similar spark in you, resilience, I think he called it. He said you understood hardship and wouldn't compromise easily." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling a soft flutter from her baby. "I hope I can live up to that." Meanwhile, Nicholas was growing more impatient. Despite his father's connections, every effort to buy the building outright was met with a polite but firm refusal from Sophia. With no purchase agreement in sight, Townsend and Associates was forced to continue paying rent, albeit begrudgingly. One crisp morning, Henry summoned Sophia to the building for a pressing issue. When she arrived, she found Nicholas waiting in the lobby with a man sporting an official city inspector badge. A wave of apprehension washed over her. "Nicholas, what's going on?" she asked, trying to maintain composure. Nicholas's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We have a problem. The city inspector received an anonymous tip about possible structural concerns in the building. Given that it's quite old, I can't say I'm surprised." The inspector, a no-nonsense middle-aged man, cleared his throat. "I'm here to check the building's structural integrity. If we find any major issues, we might have to issue a notice requiring immediate repairs or even evacuate certain floors." Sophia's mind raced. If the building was deemed unsafe, she could lose her tenants and her only source of income. She shot Nicholas a suspicious glance, suspecting that he was behind the complaint. "Let's show him around," she said, softly, determined to cooperate. They embarked on a thorough inspection, stopping at each floor while the inspector examined beams, walls, and load-bearing structures. Tension brewed between Sophia and Nicholas with every hallway they traversed. She noticed that whenever the inspector looked uncertain, Nicholas quietly offered extra commentary about the building's age or recent mishaps. At last, they ended up in the basement, dimly lit by a single bulb. It smelled of damp concrete and stale air. The inspector circled around large metal support pillars with a flashlight. Sophia held her breath, praying that the building's bones were stronger than they appeared. After an agonizing half-hour, the inspector emerged, clipboard in hand. "The structure is old, but it's not immediately compromised," he announced. A few areas need reinforcing. I'll detail them in my report. You'll be given a timetable to address the repairs. Relief flooded Sophia. Thank you. I'll make it a priority. Nicholas's expression remained unreadable, but Sophia sensed his frustration. His plan to corner her, if indeed it was his plan, had fallen short. As the inspector left, Nicholas leaned in his voice, laced with condescension. Temporary reprieve. Sophia, don't let it go to your head. She glanced at him, heart pounding with both fear and defiance. Noted. That evening, her nerves frazzled. Sophia headed back to her apartment, only to find a thick envelope slid under her door. Inside were aged photographs, letters, and a note from Abigail Martinez. Dear Ms. Kim, enclosed are personal items belonging to your Uncle Martin Kim that might shed more light on his life and relationship with you. He wished for you to have these. I believe they hold significance, not just for the building, but for you personally. Warm regards, Abigail Martinez. Sophia spread the contents on her tiny kitchen table. She discovered snapshots of Martin at different stages of his life, working odd jobs, traveling across the country. There was one photo in particular that caught her eye, a much younger Martin, standing in front of the Walton building, smiling broadly, the keys in his hand. Tucked behind the photographs was a letter, dated a year before he passed away. My dear Sophia, if you're reading this, it means I've left this world. I know we never got to know each other well, but blood ties are not easily broken. I saw your potential the day you insisted on visiting me in that run-down motel when you were just 14. You gave me some of your hard-earned babysitting money because you believed I needed it. That memory has never left me. The Walton building needs someone with heart. Townsend and Associates has tried time and again to convince me to sell. I refused. These men see buildings only as profit and loss. But you, Sophia, you see life differently. I believe you'll do what's right. With gratitude. Uncle Martin, tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. She gently traced the handwriting, recalling that day as a teen when she snuck away to see Uncle Martin. Her parents had disapproved labeling him the family black sheep. Yet she had felt compassion for him. Now he entrusted her with the building, with his legacy, an act of faith she couldn't squander. Within days, Sophia began to see progress. With the help of a small renovation loan, secured through a local credit union, sympathetic to her story, she hired a crew to fix the most pressing issues. She couldn't address everything at once, but at least she wouldn't be slapped with an eviction notice from city inspectors. Word spread of a new landlord with big dreams. A few prospective tenants showed interest in renting out the vacant spaces once repairs were complete. For Sophia, it felt like a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. Then one morning, she received an unexpected visitor in the building's lobby. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore an impeccably tailored suit. He introduced himself as Richard Townsend, Nicholas's father, and the founder of Townsend and Associates. I'd like a word with you, Miss Kim, Richard said, holding out a business card. It seems you and my son had a tense introduction. Sophia kept her guard up, but she led him to the small makeshift office she had set up on the ground floor. Richard glanced around at the half-finished walls. He spoke with a polished courtesy that Nicholas lacked. We were sorry to hear about Martin's passing. He was a stubborn man, but I respected him. Sophia nodded, searching his face for hidden motives. Thank you for your condolences. My uncle didn't mention you. He offered a faint smile. We were acquaintances in business. My firm has had its eye on this building for some time. Let me be frank. The Walton building could become the crowning jewel in a commercial redevelopment plan. I've personally invested in the surrounding neighborhood for years. He cleared his throat. I'd like to propose a fair deal, more than fair, actually. We'll buy the Walton building from you, pay you above market value. You'll be set for life, Ms. Kim. No more dealing with contractors, code inspectors, or tenants. You can secure a wonderful future for your child. Sophia's heart thumped at the mention of her baby. She couldn't deny the temptation. A massive check would solve her financial worries, guaranteeing her child a comfortable upbringing. No more stress, no more struggling to patch holes in the building's roof. But Uncle Martin's letter flashed in her mind. He'd trusted her to keep the building from falling into the hands of those who only saw dollar signs. "Thank you for the generous offer, Mr. Townsend," she replied carefully. "But I'm not prepared to sell at this time." Richard leaned back, shoulders tense. "At least consider it. I can email you the details." "No pressure," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I only want to see you and your child thrive, and the building, if I'm being honest, demands resources you may not have." Sophia forced a polite smile. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm determined to see through my uncle's vision." He rose to leave, smoothing out his lapel. "Nicholas will be in touch then. If you change your mind, let us know. This offer won't last forever." As Richard Townsend exited, Sophia clasped her hands in her lap, shaky from the confrontation. She realized that the father was as formidable as the son, just more refined in his approach. The building was at the center of a high-stakes game, and she was the unlikely player standing against a powerhouse family. 2 weeks went by, and Sophia saw little of Nicholas, although she heard him occasionally barking orders to his staff from behind the frosted glass door. She focused on immediate repairs, patching up the roof, updating the fire alarm system, and ensuring the elevator met safety standards. She poured every cent of her small loan into these tasks. Yet progress was slow and costlier than expected. The baby's due date loomed closer, and exhaustion pressed down on her like a heavy weight. One afternoon, as she was reviewing contractor invoices, a gentle knock sounded at the ground floor office. She glanced up, expecting Henry or a tenant, but found Nicholas Townsend standing at the doorway, one hand in his pocket. "Busy?" he asked with an almost cordial tone. Suspicion flickered in Sophia's eyes. "Always." "What can I do for you, Mr. Townsend?" He entered, glancing around at the clutter of papers and renovation blueprints. "This is cozy," he muttered, less sarcastic than she anticipated. She set aside her work. "Spit it out, Nicholas. I'm sure you didn't come here to compliment my office decor." He chuckled wryly, shifting his weight. "You're direct. I suppose I deserve that. I wanted to discuss the building, specifically your finances. If you're strapped for cash, Townsend and Associates could hypothetically invest in the renovation." Her eyebrows shot up. This was a departure from his earlier threats and condescension. "Invest." He sighed, rolling his eyes slightly. "Look, I'm not the villain you think I am. My father wants to own this building outright, but maybe there's a middle ground. If we invest, we gain partial equity. You keep majority ownership, but have the capital to fix the place properly." Despite herself, Sophia felt a glimmer of relief. It was exactly the type of solution she needed to expedite repairs without taking on crippling debt. But she also knew that sharing ownership with Nicholas would mean giving him a foothold in decision-making. And from experience, she suspected that might lead to a hostile takeover eventually. She frowned, pushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I can't just make that call without consulting Henry and maybe an attorney." Also, what's the catch? Nicholas's gaze flicked to her pregnant belly, then back to her eyes. No catch. Just a sound business proposition. If you manage to turn this building around and fill up the vacant floors, you'll see a steady income flow. If not, well, you'll at least have leveraged our investment instead of sinking alone. She bit her lip, torn between practicality and pride. Before she could respond, Nicholas spoke again, quieter this time. Believe it or not, I admire your courage. Most people in your position would have bailed by now. A swirl of emotions made her head spin. She had never expected a hint of respect from him. Confusion meshed with curiosity. Was this part of a cunning plan or a genuine moment? I'll think about it, she managed, keeping her tone neutral. He nodded, stepping backward. Take your time. But not too long. Construction costs aren't getting cheaper. As he left, Sophia realized her hands trembled slightly. Was an alliance with Nicholas Townsend even possible? Or was she risking everything by letting the fox guard the henhouse? In the midst of these negotiations, another curveball landed in Sophia's life. One evening, after a grueling day overseeing contractors, she returned to her apartment to find a single envelope in her mailbox with no return address. Inside was a brief typed note. Sophia, I heard you inherited a building. We need to talk. Ethan. Her breath caught in her throat. Ethan Cheng, the father of her unborn child, had left her months ago terrified by the prospect of sudden parenthood and financial instability. He'd vanished without a trace, ignoring her calls, texts, and pleas for help. And now, out of nowhere, he wanted to talk. Emotions warred within her: anger, heartbreak, curiosity. She'd come to terms with raising her baby alone, forging ahead despite the uncertain future. Did Ethan know she had come into a property and, like everyone else, suddenly see an opportunity? She wrestled with indecision. Part of her wanted to ignore him. Another part wanted answers, or at least closure. Finally, she dialed the number he had left at the bottom of the note. He answered on the first ring. Sophia, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. She almost laughed. Really? Because you did an excellent job of disappearing. He sighed. I'm sorry. Truly. Things got complicated. My mother fell ill. I lost my job. I panicked. She rolled her eyes, not sure whether to believe him. Now you're back. Yes. I want to help. I heard from mutual friends that you inherited a commercial property. That's amazing, Sophia. Think about what it means for our child. Let's meet. Her heart pounded with wary anticipation. Against her better judgment, she agreed to a short meeting at a nearby diner the following day. She spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, mind filled with swirling thoughts, the building Nicholas Townsend's investment offer, and now Ethan's sudden reappearance. It felt as though her life had collided with 1,000 diverging roads, and she was forced to choose which path to walk. The next evening, Sophia slid into a booth at Penny's Diner, an old-fashioned eatery with neon lights humming outside the window. She felt out of place among families enjoying comfort food, but she needed a neutral environment for confronting Ethan. He arrived moments later, wearing a worn coat hair slightly disheveled. He offered a small, sheepish grin. Sophia, you look well. She gave a tight nod, arms crossed protectively over her belly. Let's get to the point, Ethan. He lifted his hands in surrender. Fair enough. I've been doing some thinking. Running away was wrong. I realize that now. I want to be there for our baby, especially with all these changes in your life. You've got a building. I can help manage it." A bitter laugh escaped Sophia. "Wait, you want to help manage my building? You never so much as picked up a finance book in your life. Don't you recall how you panicked over paying half our rent?" He flinched. "I'm just trying to fix things. I messed up, okay? But this is a chance for both of us to start fresh. Maybe even as a family." She studied him, searching for sincerity. She saw desperation in his eyes, an echo of the turmoil that once drove him away. If he truly wanted to be involved, was it for love or financial opportunity? Sighing, she decided to lay it out plainly. "Look, Ethan, I'm not shutting you out of our child's life if you're serious about stepping up. But my building is a different matter. It's complicated loans, renovations, and a certain real estate mogul nipping at my heels." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "A mogul? Are you in over your head? I'm good at dealing with tough guys. I can—" She held up a hand. "Stop. I don't need a knight in shining armor. I need stability. Consistency. If you want to prove yourself, start with showing up for doctor's appointments or offering emotional support. Right now, the building is my responsibility." Ethan pressed his lips together, fidgeting with a napkin. "Okay, I understand. But I just want to help." They talked for nearly an hour, hashing over old regrets and future possibilities. Sophia remained guarded. She had built an independent life since he vanished, and trusting him again wouldn't be easy. By the time they left the diner, it was clear that while Ethan wanted a second chance, Sophia wasn't sure she wanted to give it. Back at the Walton building the next day, Sophia felt the weight of her decision regarding Nicholas's investment offer. The building's repairs had already eaten up her initial loan. Future renovations would demand a larger infusion of cash, and time was running out. Several prospective tenants asked for guaranteed completion dates before signing long-term leases. Henry approached her with a stack of invoices. "We're behind schedule, Ms. Kim. If we don't pay the contractors soon, they might walk off the job." A sense of panic rose. She couldn't let the building stagnate halfway through crucial repairs. The baby was due in a couple of months, and stress threatened to overwhelm her. With her heart in her throat, she summoned Nicholas to her temporary office. He arrived promptly, wearing a charcoal suit that seemed to command the dusty space. She took a steadying breath. "I've given thought to your investment proposal. Would you mind explaining the terms in detail?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow, a slow smirk curving his lips. He pulled out a folder and laid out a plan Townsend and Associates would provide a sizable investment for the renovations in return for a 40% stake in the Walton building's future profits. Sophia would retain 60% and full managerial control, but major decisions like selling or converting the building would require mutual agreement. Her eyes scanned the documents. The terms were surprisingly straightforward, more generous than she'd expected. Then again, 40% was not a small share, and giving Townsend and Associates a foothold might open a back door for them to seize full control eventually. Nicholas leaned forward, voice calm. "If you want complete ownership, fine. Keep turning us down. But you'll never finish these renovations in time to attract high-paying tenants. By the time you do, you'll be underwater in debt. With our help, you could have the building up and running within months." Sophia sighed, the gravity of her situation pressing on her. "What if I'm still reluctant? Is there a chance you'll push me out?" He shook his head, a flicker of something regret, maybe, crossing his expression. "Listen, I was rude at the cafe. Arrogant, yes. But this is a business proposition. If you manage this well, you'll have a stable income for you and your child. We'll have a valuable property in our portfolio. No schemes this time. The sincerity in his tone caught her off guard. She studied him, remembering how he had once laughed at her. Now he was appealing to her as a partner. Her mind spun with possibilities. Was Uncle Martin's dream worth sharing with the very people he distrusted, yet faced with unpaid invoices, code enforcement deadlines, and her baby's impending birth? Sophia felt cornered. With a trembling hand, she picked up a pen. 40% is high, she murmured, but I have no better options. Nicholas offered a short nod. Make a counter-proposal. She licked her lips quickly, scanning potential modifications. 30%. He paused, tapping a pen against the folder. 35. She narrowed her eyes, holding her ground. 32. After a tense silence, he shrugged. Deal. So they shook hands, forging an uneasy alliance. As she slid the signed documents into an envelope, Sophia couldn't help but feel like she'd made a pact with the devil, or perhaps discovered that the devil had a soul after all. The infusion of capital from Townsend and Associates worked wonders. Contractors returned, new crews were hired, and the building underwent a rapid transformation. Scaffolding enveloped the exterior windows, were replaced, and the ground floor cafe space began to take shape. A local artisanal bakery, Sweet Hearth, signed a lease for that space, excited to tap into the building's revitalized energy. Nicholas visited daily meeting with contractors or reviewing architectural plans with Sophia. They still clashed over small details, like the choice of paint color or signage style, but found a surprising rhythm in their teamwork. Melissa Harper's startup designed a bold marketing campaign, highlighting the Walton building's historic charm. Soon, the building's Instagram account drew interest from professionals seeking unique office spaces. Amid the hustle, Sophia balanced prenatal appointments and office calls. Her belly had grown rounder, making it harder to walk the building's halls all day. Sometimes Nicholas would offer an arm when the elevator was out of service, or discreetly bring her a chair during intense meetings. These small gestures caught her off guard, forging an unspoken camaraderie. Yet behind every successful milestone, a nagging worry simmered. Did Townsend and Associates plan to wrest control eventually? She kept a close eye on the finances, ensuring no unauthorized expenditures funneled money away. So far, Nicholas played fair. As renovations neared completion, the question arose. What about the second-floor offices currently occupied by Townsend and Associates? Nicholas had bigger ambitions. He wanted to expand his firm's footprint, occupying 2 floors entirely. This plan contradicted Sophia's vision of diversifying tenants. One late afternoon, they stood in front of a set of architectural sketches pinned to the wall. Nicholas pointed to the 2nd and 3rd floors. If we move Townsend and Associates into these floors, we can bring in new staff, ensuring long-term stability for the building's income. Sophia hesitated. You already have a suite? If you expand that significantly, we lose variety. Part of Uncle Martin's dream was to support small businesses. Nicholas frowned. Noble, but let's be practical. We'll pay top-dollar rent. The building's bottom line will skyrocket. Her stomach churned with indecision. And push out smaller tenants who rely on cheaper rents? He tossed the sketches onto a table. When has that ever been the responsibility of a landlord? You're in business to make money, not run a charity. Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. My uncle never saw it that way. He believed in giving back to the community. There's more to life than maximizing profit margins. Nicholas stared at her annoyance brewing. I thought we were partners. If you keep rejecting every viable option for growth, you'll bury yourself in overhead. She matched his glare. I'm not rejecting growth. I'm rejecting a monopoly that edges out the people who have helped me rebuild this place. Their heated words echoed in the near-empty corridor, tension thick as mortar dust. A thin line separated cooperation from conflict, and they were treading dangerously close to crossing it. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the Walton building turned uneasy. Contractors worked faster, finishing the new wiring and installing gleaming tiles in the refurbished lobby. Tenants moved in furniture, painting their offices in modern palettes. The building buzzed with anticipation for its grand reopening. Nicholas kept his distance, reviewing budgets and organizing Townsend and Associates' potential expansion without Sophia's input. Meanwhile, Ethan made sporadic appearances, trying to prove he was there for Sophia. She allowed him into a couple of her prenatal checkups, but wariness lingered between them. One morning, Henry rushed into Sophia's office. We have an issue. Nicholas placed an order for high-end elevator fixtures and is charging it to the building's budget without clearing it with you. Sophia felt her anger flare. She marched up to Townsend and Associates, ignoring the stares of staff as she walked into Nicholas's corner office. It was a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He stood at a sleek wooden desk phone pressed to his ear. Ending the call, he turned to face her. Is there a reason you're bypassing me for major decisions? She asked, voice trembling with barely contained fury. Nicholas shrugged. We needed updated fixtures. The old ones were cheap and didn't match the new lobby design. She slammed the door behind her. And you decided this alone. We're partners. Every major expense is supposed to be a joint decision. He set aside the phone, leaning forward on the desk. I was under the impression we both wanted the building to have a polished, upscale look. Or was that another pipe dream? Her hands balled into fists. Don't talk down to me. You're using your stake to force changes that primarily benefit Townsend and Associates, turning this into a high-end corporate environment, not the mixed business community Uncle Martin envisioned. Nicholas glared, color rising in his cheeks. Your so-called community is unsustainable if the building doesn't turn a profit. Look around, Sophia. Manhattan is ruthless. If you're not making money, you're losing it. She took a shaky breath, wanting to remain calm. I'm not opposed to improvements, but we discuss them first. From now on, you get my sign-off before any more purchases. He threw his hands in the air in exasperation. Fine, if this is how you want it. But I'm warning you, your idealistic approach might sabotage the very thing you're trying to save. Sophia turned on her heel and marched out. Tears threatened to spill not just from anger, but from the gnawing fear that he might be right. Despite their friction, the grand reopening arrived on a crisp autumn day. A ribbon-cutting ceremony took place outside the Walton building. The fresh facade gleamed the new sign reading, "The Walton Building Established 1922," in elegant gold lettering. Sophia stood at the center of the small crowd, her maternity dress now stylish and comfortable, chosen specifically for the event. Reporters from local news outlets gathered to cover the story of a young, expectant mother inheriting and reviving an historic property. The cameras clicked as she ceremonially cut the ribbon alongside Henry, with Melissa and Jonathan standing by. Nicholas lingered on the outskirts, conversing with potential investors, while Richard Townsend was notably absent. After the ceremony, guests strolled through the newly refurbished lobby, sampling pastries from Sweet Hearth. Sophia greeted them with a polite smile, though her mind remained partially fixated on the building's future. Among the attendees was a local historian, Barbara Green, who praised the preservation of the original architectural details. "The city needs more mindful restorations like this," she told Sophia. "Martin Kim would be proud." The words moved Sophia, reinforcing her decision to honor her uncle's legacy. She might have compromised by taking Nicholas's money, but she refused to let him overshadow the building's soul. Yet no sooner had the building's doors officially reopened than trouble came knocking again. A flurry of complaints about noise parking and permit violations hit Sophia's office. Some seemed exaggerated or outright fabricated. City inspectors loomed, investigating an alleged breach of historical preservation codes. At first, Sophia assumed these were typical growing pains, but she noticed a pattern. Each complaint seemed designed to stall progress or strain her resources. Who was behind it? Late one night, she received a frantic call from Melissa Harper. "Sophia, I found something you need to see," Melissa said breathlessly. "I was searching for a marketing contact and stumbled upon an email chain on the building's shared server. It looks like someone, maybe from Townsend and Associates, has been sending anonymous tips to the city about code infractions." Sophia's blood ran cold. "Send me everything." An hour later, she skimmed through damning emails, the sender's address masked through a dummy account. The tone was unmistakably urgent, fueling complaints about minor or non-existent issues. The final line in each email read, "We urge immediate action to halt all further renovations." Rage coursed through her. Had Nicholas orchestrated this sabotage, desperate to force her hand? Or was it another player in Townsend and Associates? She recalled how from the beginning, the Townsends wanted to buy the building outright, how Nicholas threatened to bury her in code violations. Now it seemed those threats were coming to life. Sophia's world was shaken when Melissa discovered anonymous emails sent from Townsend and Associates network, urging city inspectors to stall renovations. Furious, Sophia confronted Nicholas in front of his staff, slamming printed emails on his desk. He appeared genuinely shocked. "I never authorized this," he insisted. Though his denial seemed sincere, Sophia's trust was fraying. The sabotage aligned too closely with earlier threats, and while Nicholas promised to investigate, doubt lingered. Days later, amidst mounting inspections and accusations, Sophia's stress caught up with her, sending her to the hospital with false labor pains. While recovering, Nicholas visited with flowers and an apology. One of our analysts sent the complaints, he admitted. Claimed he was following orders, but I can't prove who gave them. My father denies involvement. Sophia listened skeptical, yet moved by Nicholas's concern. He insisted he had no part in sabotaging their shared investment and pledged to find the truth. The sincerity in his eyes hinted at a man torn between loyalty and principle. For the first time, Sophia sensed that Nicholas might be more than just a corporate adversary, perhaps even an unexpected ally. But one thing was clear. Someone within Townsend and Associates still saw her as an obstacle, and the fight to preserve the Walton building was far from over. As Nicholas quietly left the hospital room, Sophia stared at the ceiling, her hand resting on her belly, bracing for the next storm. At the boardroom of Townsend and Associates, Sophia faced Richard Townsend and his assembled executives. Calm but fierce, she listened as Richard proposed buying out her majority stake in the Walton building, offering a hefty payout and a promise to handle all future management. "You'll retain 10% if you like," he said, "and your hands will be free to focus on your baby." Sophia fueled by months of sacrifice, and her uncle's legacy refused. "I won't be bullied out of what I've fought to preserve," she said firmly. The room felt tense until Nicholas unexpectedly challenged his father. "You knew about the sabotage, didn't you?" he accused. Richard's cold warning, "Be careful whose side you're on," only solidified Nicholas's stance. Back at the Walton building, Sophia confronted Nicholas. "Where do you stand?" she asked. He looked torn, but resolute. "My father crossed the line. I'm with you now." The shift in his loyalty surprised her, but it also brought a sense of vindication. In the span of one brutal meeting and one honest conversation, the battle lines were redrawn. Sophia knew that danger still loomed, but for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. Determined to protect her legacy, Sophia contacted attorney Abigail Martinez, who swiftly filed an injunction against Townsend and Associates. At the same time, Ethan urged Sophia to share her story publicly. With help from Melissa and journalist Reena Patel, a powerful article hit the New York Times expectant mother battles corporate giant. The public rallied behind her hashtags, trended community leaders voiced support, and tenants praised her integrity. Townsend and Associates faced backlash and falling investor confidence. Richard's tactics backfired, and for the first time, Sophia felt the tide turning in her favor. Amid mounting legal battles and media pressure, Sophia went into labor late one night. Ethan rushed her to the hospital, where she gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Mia Kim. Exhausted but overjoyed, Sophia held her daughter close, overwhelmed by the journey that led to this moment. Ethan stood by, visibly moved, and even Nicholas arrived later, with a quiet congratulations and a soft gift his presence, a comforting surprise. For a brief moment, all conflicts faded, replaced by the warmth of new life. Returning home with Mayor Sophia, found her cramped apartment barely suitable for a newborn. While she adjusted to motherhood, Henry and Melissa managed the Walton building in her stead. Meanwhile, legal pressure mounted against Townsend and Associates. Richard's sabotage scandal exploded, leading to internal turmoil. One afternoon, Nicholas arrived at Sophia's door with startling news. Richard had stepped down as CEO under the guise of health reasons. "He's out," Nicholas said simply, then added, "And I quit too. I can't work for someone who would stoop so low." Sophia was stunned. Townsend and Associates had been Nicholas's inheritance. Yet he walked away for integrity. He promised to stay involved with the Walton building, not as a corporate figure, but as someone who truly believed in its future. Cradling Mia in her arms, Sophia realized the tides had fully turned. Against all odds, she had protected both her child and her uncle's dream. The building and everyone tied to it was on the path to something far greater. Over the following weeks, tenants thrived. The building's occupancy rate soared, and Sophia officially moved into a modest but comfortable apartment on the building's top floor, her new home and headquarters. Ethan remained in Mia's life, slowly proving himself as a caring father, though romance between him and Sophia was uncertain. Nicholas visited frequently, advising on real estate matters. Their friendship, and possibly more, began to blossom, forged in the crucible of conflict. Uncle Martin's legacy lived on the old building's hallways, echoing with renewed optimism and the laughter of newborn hope. From a battered maternity dress to becoming the unexpected landlord of an entire commercial building, Sophia Kim's journey is a testament to the surprising twists life can throw our way. She navigated sabotage, battled corporate greed, and wrestled with her own uncertainties, all while preparing to welcome her daughter into the world. In the end, The once outdated Walton building found renewed vitality, much like Sophia herself, who discovered inner strength she never knew she possessed. If her story inspired you, if it reminded you that even life's harshest storms can lead to grand, unpredictable destinies, then spread the word. Like this video, share it with friends and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of resilience, redemption, and unexpected fortune. Your support helps keep these stories alive, so let's continue celebrating the power of hope and courage, one extraordinary narrative at a time.